Hey everyone. Hello, welcome back to the Sage Dragon Book Show. I am your host, Shaquana. I hope you all are well. It is Saturday, November 22nd, 2025. If you join us, say hi. Tell us where you're from. If you're new to the show, I launched this book show back in April to share my love of books with the world. I have a fun, jazzy way that I am um, sharing this love of books where I invite people to learn about the books that I'm reading through my book reviews. But I take it a step further. I like to take the books that I read and pull out the themes and bring them to a discussion. And this way, if you haven't read the book, I don't give spoilers. So, in case you can go back and read it, but a lot of times these books have so much rich information in them, whether they're fiction, nonfiction, that we can discuss themes or as a way to bring you into the book. So, how do you like that? If this sounds like something that you would enjoy, check out Sage Dragon Book Show. I have a YouTube channel. You can find us on the Real HD. So, we're going to get into today's book in a moment. First, book news of the week. It's an exciting time in the book world. It's award season. So there were just two awards, prominent awards that were given out over the last 2 weeks since I last had a show. And I wanted to spend some time discussing these books and these awards. So the first award show was the Booker Prize. And that happened 2 weeks ago. And the winner of the Booker Prize for 2025 was a book called Flesh by David Salzalay. He was born in Canada. He grew up in London and now lives in Vienna. And let's see, I have a description of this book. 15-year-old Esteban lives with his mother in a quiet apartment complex in Hungary. New to the town and shy, he's unfamiliar with the social rituals at school and soon becomes isolated when his neighbor, a married woman close to his mother's age, as his only companion. Their encounters shift into a clandestine relationship that Esteban barely understands, and his life soon spirals out of control. As the years pass, he's carried gradually upwards on the 21st century tides of money and power, moving from the army to the company of London's super rich, with his own competing impulses for love, intimacy, status, and wealth, winning him unimaginable riches until they threaten to undo him completely. Spare and penetrating, Flesh asks profound questions about what drives a life, what makes it worth living, and what breaks it. And I did read a few reviews about this book. I've heard mixed reviews. It's not that I've ever heard that it was a bad book, and I don't think it would be bad if it won Book of the Year for the UK. But I do hear that depending on your tolerance, it could be a challenging book because it has a lot of triggers in it from, you know, inappropriate relationships to poverty and violence and others. But I have a clip that I'd like to show of someone, I think he's doing a really good job enacting a small part of the book. So, can we show that clip?
After only a few days, it's unbearable not to see her at all. Not to know where she is or what she's doing. Even her hatred and anger would be preferable to that, is what he feels. And it's with that feeling that he knocks on the door of her flat one evening. He isn't sure exactly why he's doing it or what he will say. He has to knock for quite a long time. Finally, her husband opens the door. "What is it?" he says.
Is she there?
Ishvan asks him. "What?
Is she there?
What are you talking about?" her husband says.
Is she?
"No," her husband says, already shutting the door. Instinctively, Ishvan pushes it open again. Her husband puts out a hand to stop him. "What do you think you're doing?" he says. Sure that she is there and that her husband just wants to prevent him from seeing her, Ishvan tries to push past him into the flat. There's a scuffle on the landing. Mostly it's just pushing and shoving. And then her husband falls down the stairs. He tries to hold onto the metal handrail, but he isn't able to. And there's a strange, loud sound as his head hits it further down. And then he's lying on the concrete floor of the half landing, next to his wife's plants. And he doesn't get up. It's very quiet suddenly. He hears voices from somewhere down in the stairwell. When it's obvious that the man isn't going to get up, Ishvan starts to walk down the stairs. His legs are shaking under him. They're shaking so much that it's almost difficult to walk. He passes the landing where the man is lying and where a few of his wife's plants have been knocked over, spilling soil onto the concrete, and keeps going down.
Woo, that was intense. What if there's anyone out there? What do y'all think? And what do you all think about these vignettes that the some of these book publishers are doing to pull people in? I thought it was cool. So if you go onto the Booker Prize website, you'll see some of the finalists for the prize. There's some vignettes about their books, and they're just 2-minute clips where actors and voice actors are playing parts of the story, and it's another way to experience these great pieces of literature. I haven't read Flesh. I'm not sure if I will. I just have such a long TBR. That means to be read list. I have such a long one, but it does sound cool. So if anyone else reads it, let me know. It'd be great to have some more discussion about it. So that's Flesh. So moving on, a week after the Booker Awards was the National Book Awards. So that's like the American prominent award. It's like the Grammys for books. And I actually watched the show. It was this past Wednesday evening. You could watch it on YouTube. And with the National Book Awards, they do theirs a little different. They have several categories: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, translated literature, and young people's literature. And they do it every year in November. Similar. There's hundreds of books that are nominated. There's a distinguished panel of judges created. They have to spend the earlier part of the year reading all these books. Then they get together and they create a long list of about 10 finalists, and then they narrow it down to a short list of 5 finalists. So these are the winners this year. The True Story of Raha the Gullible won for fiction. One Day, Everyone Will Always Have Been Against This. That's getting a lot of buzz. That was in the nonfiction category. The Intentions of Thunder by Patricia Smith, poetry. We Are Green and Trembling. That's translated literature. And young people's literature was The Teacher of No Man Land. So congratulations to all those winners. I really enjoyed watching it. Kareem Belly Ray was performing. The host was, he was kind of like, seemed a little nervous, but he was fun. But I want to show a clip because you all know I love poetry. I write poetry as well and read it. And it's another area that I want to further go into because I'm so passionate about it. So the woman that won, Patricia Smith, she gave a really great speech. So we have a clip here of her acceptance speech for the award, if we can show that.
Do you know Annie? Do you know Annie? She is tired of these questions. She does not know Patricia. She does not know Annie. My name is Patricia. Her name is Annie. What does this have to do with poetry, you ask? I'm going to tell you. Suddenly she leans forward, her milky eyes narrowing, looking for mine. This is what hope looks like now. A mother maybe trying her best to see you, and God might grant you a second of grace. Maybe then you can finally tell her how poetry has burned you another history, and maybe she will finally ask, and maybe she will smile with all the knowing, but my mother does not smile. Her eyes are needles as she remembers just enough of me. The soft smacking stops. She says, "You're ugly." Her voice is dust, raspy, and unpracticed. Dimming eyes pin me to our past. "You ugly," she spits again, throwing her whole tiny self into the two words. What does this have to do with poetry? I'm gonna tell you. I was a child taught that I had to escape my skin, which my mother called your too black self, mixing baby lotion with poisonous skin tone cream, pinching my nose to narrow its landscape, scrubbing the darkness of summer play from the back of my neck with a washcloth dipped in Lysol, poured Tide laundry detergent into my bathwater. I was taught that I needed to escape the black that surrounded me, black that kept me ugly and stupid, and all the way down, I was nobody good and I was nowhere good. There I was, looking for the top of the place I was, looking for the next place, looking for another home in another skin. But what did the poet say to me? "Child, look at where you are. Look at the blessings you're trying so hard to be beyond. Child, look at where you are. Look at the portly butcher in his apron weighted down with blood and sawdust. Child, look at where you are. Look at the Reverend Matthew Thomas half moonwalking across the pulpit. Child, look at where you are. Look at your mama, steady hating the you that you are. Look at how pretty she is anyway." So bona fide and original Chicago West Side colored girl, I studied my skin until it was mine again, not my mother's. I rose among storytellers, not beyond any single one of them. I skinned my knees on concrete glittering with glass, rejoiced at the double negatives and perfectly wrought metaphors we sing. My mother, Annie Pearl Smith of Aliceville, Alabama, died on March 15, 2024, without saying another word beyond the two that she left me. But I can't help but smile, thinking of her there in the great unknowable with Gwen and Audrey and Wanda and Tony and June, looking down and nudging her over and over. Annie Pearl, that your baby girl standing there in front of all them folks? Child, look at where she is. Thank you.
Yeah, wow. I listened to that speech again today. Look at where she is. Let's just think about this for a minute. It's 2025. Patricia Smith is 70 years old. So let's just get a calculator, type in 2025, put 70 minus, and it's 1955. That's the year that Patricia Smith was born. Take 1955. Say her mother was 20. She might have been younger because women were having children younger then. But I'm going to say 20 years from there, 1935. That was still a time in the country where it was legal to go to separate schools. And the reason why I'm saying this is when you hear Patricia talk about her own mother dousing her skin and her having these internalized feelings of self-hatred, I feel like we're becoming desensitized to that because we hear it so much. And there's people who say they're tired of talking about these topics and racial fatigue and Black fatigue. But we really can't lose sight of the fact that we're not that far removed from legalized discrimination, from the Jim and Jane Crow eras, from Reconstruction. These are 2 and 3 and 4 lives that are sharing the planet with us. And we're not far removed from the people who felt that this was the correct way to be. If some of those people trace their grandparents and their great-great-parents, some of them are still alive as well. So why wouldn't we feel like we need to continue to unpack the results of these atrocities and heal from them and move forward? I was just having a conversation with a relative who told me they don't want to hear it about it. They don't want to teach their children about it. They think it's harmful and they think it's divisive. But then, if Patricia Smith, who didn't get into poetry and didn't have the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks to free her and see her beauty, or the cafeteria cook that helped her achieve humanity and literacy, and she internalized the hatred that came from her mother, who internalized it from the harmful feelings that were put upon her and people during the 50s and 60s. How would she break free? She's going to continue to pass that down generation to generation, and it might be different wording, but it continues. So it does need to be unpacked, and poetry is a way to do it, and literature is a way to do it. So I was really, really inspired by that. And you can go to the National Book Foundation, or you can type in National Book Awards 2025 on YouTube and see the speech, and you can actually watch the whole awards. The other thing was the gentleman, I forgot his name, Terrence, started with a Terrence. He is the one that announced it. He was the judges chair this year. He gave some really good advice, and he said that he always tells people who are interested in getting into poetry or learning about it to get the 10 books that were on the long list for that year, read them, and that can give you a pulse of America's poetry. So I'm going to take his advice as a gift to myself for the hot before the year ends. I want to get the whole collection of books that look. You see that cover? Can we put that cover back on? Yeah, the intention. That's stunning. That's a winner right there. But there's a lot of the other book that's getting a lot of attention is called Scorched Earth, and she's also a Black woman poet who was in the finalists. But congratulations to all the winners. It was really a great show. All right, so let's get into today's book. This was a very thought provoking book. One of the I think I would say I read a lot of amazing books this year in 2025. And this was one of the ones that I would put up there. It's called Girl on Girl: How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. And it's by an author named Sophie Gilbert. She's a staff writer at The Atlantic. She writes about television, books, and pop culture, a finalist for 2022 Pulitzer Prize, writer for The Atlantic. And she has another book on womanhood bodies, literature choice. The title, I was looking at some list of recommended books. And as soon as I saw the title, I was like, I need to read this, because I find myself looking at the state of womanhood in the Western world, womanhood as a whole, Black womanhood, all the intersections. And I just say to myself, as someone who grew up in the 80s, and I'm a Gen Xer, and I have a daughter, and I've been very proud to be a woman and a girl. But when I look at some of the values that we collectively have, especially as it's expressed in pop culture, I'm like, how did we get here? So I have these images up of, there was a battle with some of the women rappers, Cardi B and Nicki Minaj. And here's another image of these women that were like highly educated, selective university, Ivy University, successful, and they're on this reality show. There's such a surge in plastic surgery. And these are just some trends of the times of being a modern woman. And I said, how did we get here? You look at this People magazine article. Anita Hill, she was waiting for Joe Biden's apology in her 30-year fight against gender. And then you juxtapose it against these victims of Jeffrey Epstein's rally at Capitol Hill. And I'm like, you see the through line? How did we get here? Two women ran for president, 2016 and 2024. Both of these women were political women. They were both senators. It's a natural thing for men to run for president after they're senators, maybe governors. No one questions it. Yet these women were, I don't have to go into how criticized they are. And this really isn't a conversation about if the negative things they did. Not that I'm against them being criticized. There's a particular reason why I'm bringing up the fact that two women that were qualified under how we categorize qualifications were not elected. How do we get here? You have a woman who's named Fortune's most powerful woman who launched her career from a sex tape. So these are just some examples of the state of womanhood in the Western world. And one of the book that I'm talking about, Girl on Girl, provides some good context going back since the 90s on how we got to where we got to and a path forward. I have a clip that I'd like to show at this time. It's called How the 90s Girl Power Movement Turned into Marketing, and it tees up the book nicely. So can we play that, please?
When the 90s started, the women at the center of pop culture were incredibly transgressive. We're talking about figures like Madonna, Janet Jackson, Tori Amos, Ani DeFranco. By the end of the 90s, this kind of boundary-pushing feminism was replaced by unthreatening girlhood. Today on the show, how did that replacement happen, and how did it change culture? I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Commotion. Sophie Gilbert is here with me today. She's a culture critic at The Atlantic and a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Her new book, which I'm holding in my hands, is called Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. Sophie takes a deep dive into the 90s and early aughts, when movies like American Pie were box office gold.
No longer will our penises remain flaccid and unused. We will fight for every man out there who isn't getting laid and should be. This is our day. This is our time. And by God, we will not stand by and watch history condemn us into celibacy. Amen.
I like that.
Yes, we will make a stand. We will succeed.
About time!
We will get laid! Yes!
Yikes. Sophie writes about how the late 90s was a consequential moment when we saw this big turn towards girlhood and away from womanhood, and how that turn showed up everywhere, from TV, film, music, and fashion. Sophie, thanks for being here, friend.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Listen, I hear that clip now. I've seen the movie when I was a teen, but I hear that clip now, and if it wasn't for the rousing music, I would say that's an incel manifesto.
It really is. And I'm so glad you played that clip, because I'd forgotten how stirring the music is. Like the trumpets, the fanfare, like the sort of real, like, underscoring that this is a noble mission that the heroes are going to go on. They will lose their virginity. They will get laid. And then when you listen to the words, you're like, oh my God.
Like, what are you talking about?
Do the women get a say in this? Like,
no, clearly not.
Yeah.
And I should say, like, it wasn't even the only movie made of this particular premise, right? Like, it was sort of like it was in a family of these movies. It was sort of like a common thing.
yeah, and the weird thing was, it was actually one of the sweetest and one of the like the more evolved, I would say. And researching it was fun, because everything that came after was sort of very much in that model, but so much worse.
Oh, so tell me about this. So you started this book in 1999. That's the year that you turned 16. What was going on in pop culture that year?
So 1999 was the year I turned 16. It was the year that Britney Spears was on the cover of Rolling Stone. I think she was 17 at the time, in a pink and black polka dotted bra, clutching a phone in one hand and a Teletubby doll in the other. So it's this very kind of transgressive, like childlike sexualized image. American Beauty came out that year. That was a movie in which Kevin Spacey's character's midlife crisis involves a very sexualized crush on his teenage daughter's best friend. That movie won 5 Oscars. It was the year that the Abercrombie and Fitch catalogue, which I think was marketed at 13 to 18-year-olds, featured an interview with the porn star Jenna Jameson, who was harangued repeatedly throughout the interview by the interviewer who wanted to touch her breasts. So it was just this very kind of sexualized start to sort of ushering in the new millennium, and this idea that, particularly with regard to teenagers, that something was going on with culture that was quite creepy.
What you're describing is an onslaught, right? Like you're sort of describing an onslaught that is coming from all angles, and it's almost kind of impossible for it not to shape you. But I think like what's even wilder is that it would have been some kind of whiplash, because earlier in the 90s, only years before that, there was this phrase "girl power," and it came from this band. Look, that's Bikini Kill. We got to talk about the Rag Girl moment, because it's such a stark sort of juxtaposition from where the 90s started, where the 90s ended up. So tell me about...
Yeah, so then it gets into, so first, I'm glad, thank you, producer, for showing that image of American Beauty and Britney Spears and the Teletubby, because that was a time I had already become a young woman. I was like, actually, I had gotten through that era. So I wasn't a teenager with that programming in my consciousness. But I remember that time period because it seemed like there was this shift from womanhood to girlhood, and girlness and teenagerish became more fetishized. It started to become a thing to position more teens and young girls in these like sexual ways that had damaging effects moving forward. So let's go a little further. We've got another clip that's going to talk about how the girl power movement got appropriated. So can we show that next clip?
Moment led by artists like Bikini Kill. What was going on then?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I knew I wanted to write a book about 2000s culture because I had all these questions about what happened. And when I started researching it, it just all happened in the 90s. Like the 90s were this decade where this real shift took place in culture. And at the beginning of the decade, there was this real momentum. There was this sense of like third wave feminism's energy and Anita Hill's testimony in the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings, and the Riot Girl movement had this like real creative force. I think they were making zines, they were making music, but they were talking very explicitly about activist, things that they wanted to change, about getting women freedom from sexual assault and harassment. And their music was very intentional and it was very political. And they did have this slogan, which I think derived from the idea that you could put two words together that wouldn't go together, and those words would be girl and power. And so it was this sort of very like powerful and like really intentional slogan that was demanding change, I think, and was demanding that people change the way that they thought about girls and women. And
it was a provocative thing to say.
It really was.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be. It was supposed to make people sort of consider their thinking a bit more. And then the Spice Girls happened. And I love, being in the UK at the time I think I was 13 when Spice came out. It was so thrilling. Like visually, they were so enticing. Like their aesthetic was so great. They were so absurd. Like they were really playful. But they took this slogan, girl power, and they kind of appropriated it in a way that lost its meaning, I think. Like the way that they used it was very celebratory. It was like girl power. Women can do anything we want now. We're free. And it really, I think, ushered in the shift in the 90s from third wave feminism to post-feminism, which was the idea that feminism was no longer necessary. Women had achieved everything they needed to. And now it was much more about having fun, spending money. And it just kind of muted, I think, the energy of the original girl power statement.
It makes me think of The Right to Sex, the book by the Oxford philosopher Anya Srinivasan, because like
Yeah, and so what the book kind of gets into is how, if you look here, there was also an article about it. There was a group called Riot Girl. They were in the UK and they were speaking out against the challenges that girls and women were facing during that time, not just in the Western world, but just throughout all of humanity. And then a force came along that wanted to make this more of a palatable kind of poppy thing. So they put together the Spice Girls, and it ended up being more about like selling things and marketing. And it watered down the message of girl power. There was a quote in the book that a very prominent woman artist was saying that she heard a music executive say, I'd rather have women that I can just get along with, that I like, than are talented. So they wanted it to be more about likability, definitely looks, and they molded this group, the Spice Girls, to be girls who sold. And so I have one last clip that gets further into that. Can we show that?
all women to a much more kind of individualistic idea of like just do you like do whatever you need, girl, you got this. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like it sort of ushered in the shift for the lean in feminism that came in later, that was very much about get powerful yourself and then you can help other women, like but sort of
Right.
focus on yourself first.
There's also the larger shift, which is, the shift from womanhood at the start of the early 90s to this larger emphasis on girlhood. And you see that emphasis on girlhood that starts in the late 90s kind of carry through kind of all the way to now. Why do you think that was successful? How do you think that switch happened?
There was so much in movies in the 1990s that was about fetishizing teenagers in a way that was really like quite enlightening to me to revisit, because I remembered being catcalled by guys in trucks when I was like 12, 13, and I think I always felt like it was my fault, like something was going, but it was just so much in the culture. You had so many movies that were kind of taking a really prurient view of like young girls, like Beautiful Girls, the movie with Natalie Portman. There was a movie called The Babysitter starring Alicia Silverstone, where like her character is a babysitter who three men just become completely obsessed with. Stealing Beauty with Liv Tyler, where everyone in the movie is obsessed with the question of like, who will Liv Tyler's character lose her virginity to? And it's sort of this very like creepy kind of gaze. And in my research, what a lot of it seemed to date back to was the AIDS crisis and the idea that there was so much anxiety around sex after AIDS. But a lot of people seem to interpret that as the idea that teenagers were somehow safer because they weren't sexually active yet, or like they were safer as objects of lust. So that was one thing. And then in music, I think
That's a creepy conclusion to arrive at.
I
right?
know, I'm
Because,
sorry. It's so gross
yeah,
to think
yeah,
about.
of course.
But it
Yeah.
did make sense to me. It sort
Yeah.
of clarified a lot of things in film.
Yeah.
And then in music, what the Spice Girls did, they were just so successful at selling things. Someone on this tour told me they had a Spice Girls toaster. Which I haven't been able to fact check, but if anyone has a Spice Girls toaster, please let me know. But within, I think, their first year and a half as a band, they had like $500 million worth of marketing and commercialized deals. And when people saw that, and they saw how much money teenage girls had as a demographic, because they had babysitting money, they didn't have mortgages, they had money for frivolities. Like that was it for the angry women of rock. It was all about pop stars who could sell things, who could make Pepsi deals, who could be commercialized very easily in ads, and who were obviously younger and more pliable.
There's I think what I'm stuck on is the juxtaposition of threat, right? Because I think the women that I named earlier, in being transgressive, they are actually issuing pretty direct threats to the way that we think about sex, the way that we think about power, the way we think about class.
Yeah.
And does it surprise you how easy it was to displace them in favor of this kind of, unthreatening girlhood that could maybe sell a toaster?
A toaster.
Yeah.
I think it surprised me how quickly it happened and how quickly the energy and the momentum of this movement that was really about trying to force a change, trying to carve out space for women in music, trying to sort of have the freedom for women to say what they really wanted to say unfettered, how quickly that was just sort of taken away, how quickly it was eroded.
So that gives you a sense of the intelligence and the thoughtfulness that went into the book. It's a lot of heavy research that she talked about. So the contents of the book, she starts in the 90s, getting into how the whole girl power movement was misappropriated and it turned into something about selling. It became about marketing. Then she gets into things like the new millennium in the 2000s and how what was happening like with the movies and films. That movie, American Pie, there was an American Beauty and American Pie. So it was all these American names. One was about like the American Beauty thing was, a middle-aged guy lusting after this teenage girl. And then the American Pie was like teen boys trying to figure out a way to have sexual conquests. But then it was a bunch of sexual comedies about that. And it's especially in the white world, I guess what I'm understanding from these readings and podcasts is that it sent some unhealthy messages to boys about like entitlement to sex versus sex being an enjoyable thing that, happens between two consenting beings. It became more about like entitlement and conquest. Later on, it gets into reality TV and how, the industry changed and then it gets into further about like the unreasonable expectations that started being put on girls and women in terms of like looks, which led to the opening world of plastic surgery. There's a lot on porn and how porn exploded in the 2000s and influenced other parts of pop culture from music to even fashion. Think about like those hip huggers. I mean, it became the style. Like I remember in the 2000s, I couldn't find a pair of jeans if they weren't hip huggers. And the problem with the hip huggers was if you were bending down, the rest. It showed everything. And it just you look back and you're like, "Oh, wow. I can remember when it started to become really, really popular to get Brazilian waxes." And fine, if you have a desire to, remove hair from different parts of your body, but there was a notion that this was a more sexually attractive way for a grown woman to be. And this tied directly to the time when it was cool to overly fetish teen girls. And now we are where we are now, where they don't even want to release these Epstein files. So you see the through line. The book gets into later on how now that, because what happened was feminism just got disseminated. It went from something that was about reading, dissecting, being intentional, being active. Now, I can have a whole conversation about womanism, which I will, but I'm talking about this particular book because feminism was not inclusive to the needs of Black people and Black women. So we're gonna talk about that in some other episodes. But I really appreciate the way that Sophia lined this up because this has major ramifications for all women because we're in the Western world and even women of color have been influenced by these changes that were happening since the 90s. This whole making of female ambition and the girl boss movement and how it's, hustle, hustle, hustle culture and all of that. hasn't really gotten us anywhere. A lot of that replaced true activism. And now you have things like a quote unquote Nicki Minaj going to the UN to speak out about issues that she's not really taking the time to educate herself about, and it being accepted instead of using, even if they wanted to talk about interfaith practices, why not use someone who's a scholar in that area? We play around, and we accept people playing around with real change because there's no respect for it. And we think everything is kind of like a gimmick. So anybody, let me stop for a moment because do we have anyone out there, producer?
Sure. Ask your question.
No, just I want to stop and see if there what people are thinking about what they may have heard thus far about how the 90s and 2000s culture, the culture basically over the last actually almost 30 years, 25 years, how pop culture and the impact of it um, has affected women. And I will also say boys and men because they were growing up during this era too. They were getting these messages as well. They were getting the messages about girls and guys and then in themselves and how to interact with each other. And we are at a time now where there's a lot of polarization, between genders. I was really, the reason why I kept showing that particular clip was it was really refreshing to see a young man. He looked like he might be a millennial brother, having a very, a smart conversation about this because he's probably trying to unpack how it impacted his own, journey growing up.
So while we're waiting for our viewers to respond, I'll say this. I have seen a shift. We're practically the same age. So we've grown up pretty, uh, parallel. So I have seen a shift from the celebrity or the famous person not just being famous for what their entertainment value is, being put in positions, like you said, Nicki Minaj, being leaders of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember back to the civil rights movement, that wasn't something that we did. We had other people who were more qualified as leaders in those demographics. And now we have celebrities leading. I'll even remember back to the when Congress had hearings on reparations,
Mm-hmm.
and one out of every three people that they had on that committee panel was a celebrity.
Yeah.
It wasn't someone who was an activist or
Yeah.
a political scientist or an economist
Mm.
or a sociologist, someone that could really speak to
Yeah.
the issue. It was a celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, what are people going to take from that? And we even have three people that were prominent in the Hollywood field, and now they're presidents and governors: Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronald Reagan,
Yeah.
and now Trump. And
Mm-hmm.
they're presidents now,
Mm-hmm.
running world affairs.
Yeah.
So what are people going to think is the right way to live your life?
Yeah.
Follow a celebrity.
Yeah.
Follow the celebrity trends. And then when you have Fortune 2000 companies telling these celebrities what to do to endorse their products, those things become the guiding principles of a society, unfortunately. So then you
Yes.
have American Beauty and the hip huggers and all of the rest of the misogyny and misandry that comes with it all. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. Thank you for those thoughtful comments. Exactly. And I did this episode because I wanted people to see that we can reflect and look back. And I appreciate this book for doing this because even moving forward, I'm going to be way more selective about what I when I look at a film, any product of pop culture, films, fashion, now it's social media, reality TVs, I find myself saying, what are they trying to promote? I'm also seeing, maybe because it's more obvious, but even shows that I watch now that I like, I notice the product placement more closely, the products that they're pushing. And it's not to say that I won't, I'm saying, disengage from it because we're in the world. But I think it's important to be aware because we were being sold that this was feminism. And that's why I titled it Faux Feminism, because it was a original girl power movement, which was more bolder and stronger. There were people later in the episode, I'll get into this book by Sister Soldier, which was like ushering in the 90s era. And there's all these topics in her book. It's called No Disrespect. And it was a difference. I'm like sitting back now because I'm reflecting on the whole 25, 30 years. There was a difference in the television shows, the images. It was more about being a woman than being a girl. I also have noticed how the voices, like the actual tone of voices that get a lot of radio play, tend to be women who sound like little girls. And I was noticing this a lot in the pop songs the last 15 years. And I find myself sometimes cringing because they're saying these real adult themes, but they sound like they're three. And I'm like, I don't want to hear a 3-year-old sound talking about some of the stuff that is grown folks' business, like they used to say. So I can see how fashion, movies have kind of pedophiled us in collectively. I'm not saying we all are, but we got to watch that programming. And the whole thing about making us just these product sellers, these product pushers, because that's kind of what happened with the Spice Girls. And now the new version of that is through being influencers and stuff. So it was a really, really, really helpful book. Let's see other points in it. There's the talk about crude. Oh, this was an interesting point on slide 19. I'll read a little bit of this quote. Gilbert writes that popular culture is invariably calibrated to male desire, which has ushered in cruelty and disdain towards 51% of the population, particularly if they're not white. Women are told they're never good enough, but better can be bought, contoured, surgically enhanced, diet selling an ideal that can't actually be humanly attained, but can be purchased now with a single click. Getting by as a woman in post-feminist times means not taking apparently misogynist music, art, TV too seriously while women are being exploited, mocked, assaulted in plain sight. When porn is everywhere, most worryingly on the phones of primary school children, no wonder 38% of women in the UK say they experienced unwanted slapping, choking, gagging, or spitting during sex. The blokish irony as defense motive, which nudges women to be in on the gag, denies the truth that sexist and racist cultural products profoundly change the way society thinks about women and therefore how women are treated. As someone who really grew up listening to early hip hop and women hip hop artists like Salt and Pepper and Queen Latifah, and I listen to a lot of what is women rappers today. You'll hear like modern day people say, oh, they're celebrating their sexuality. I don't really think they are. I think they are copying what has they've been programmed. It takes a while for you to be a person to really understand sexuality for yourself and what you really enjoy. And some of this that they're spouting on some of these records is like musical porn. They know that it sells, but they don't really feel that way. And they don't, because the minute someone gets a really nice guy, they're getting married, they're having children. but they're spouting that. And it's not real art. You know, sexuality can be in art, but this isn't real art. This is some fake stuff. So I want us to get more discerning about what we're listening to. We gave a lot of stuff a pass for a long time. Well, it's freedom of speech. Yeah, it could be freedom to be whack. And we used to say if something was whack. Um, there was a term that was coined by Diddy called hater, and nobody wanted to be a hater. So for a long time, at first we were haters. If you said anything critical about pop culture, about someone, we used to be able to diss people and give it and get it in the 80s and 90s, but then it became you're a hater. You're a hater. You can hate me now. So nobody wanted to be a hater. Let's be some haters. What's that guy? I've seen some of his videos online. I think his name is Blakely, and he has a series now called Hating Ass Bitches. And he talks about like people who are like standing up for the crap that's going on right now. So he's like he's making hating to be a cool thing now because we need more criticism, and that's what this book does. So in terms of a way forward, I think we need more reflection. We need more diverse film, music, movies, social media content. We need to get more educated and make it cool to read and cool to be smart, cool to be natural, to not overly feel like you have to like contort yourself for a certain gaze or for to win, pop culture. Identify and define, focus more on collectivism, that collaboration versus competition, and the civic political conscious expansion era. I think it's coming. People are kind of tired of what happened. But yeah, we were really sold a bill of goods literally over these last almost 30 years with the the poppiness, the exploitation, the fake marketing that got certain people wealthy, a very small amount of people. And now we're looking around and we're not the better off for it. So there is some amazing art still being made in the world. And I think we need to just go back to, um, not go back, but move forward with like celebrating real, true art and being real, true people. So I thank Sophia for writing this book. I give it a 4 stars. I think it's well researched. It's not that long of a read. I think it's under just about 300 pages. It's very reflective and a conversation starter. And there's several interesting podcasts on the book. If you want to go on YouTube and type in Girl on Girl Sophia Gilbert, and you'll be able to listen to those books. And I think it'll get us thinking about how we embrace even the pop cultural messages we're receiving now, and for any of us raising younger girls and boys, because we want to raise boys and girls that are understanding of the issues that each of them have, because we want people to be able to interact in society, and that education is how you do it. Okay, so please like, subscribe, and share, and visit the StreamYard link. And for anyone who's watching in the future, we'll be looking for those comments. So when I was thinking about putting this episode together, it took me back to the 90s. And, I thought about shows like Teen Summit. I thought about the journalist Amanda Lewis. She passed away this year from cancer, and how we had those intellectual examples of beautiful women that were, they were outspoken, they were educated, and they were trying to pass something on to us. And a book that I read that was influential to me as a teen girl was called No Disrespect by Sister Soldier. So, as an author profile, Sister Soldier, she's now 61 years old, born from in the Bronx, went to Rutgers University. She's an author now. She was originally a hip hop artist. She was down with Public Enemy, known for, she's written a lot of books, but No Disrespect was her first. And then the classic Coldest Winter Ever, and then the whole Midnight series. And there's another great book that I liked by her, good book, I'll say. It was called Love After Midnight. I read that one last year. And she's married and she has a child, and she lives in, I saw her recently on an interview clip, and she's lives somewhere in the Middle East, but she travels the world. So just to take it back, here's a clip, an article that I found interesting when I was doing some research on her, how Sister Soldier went from radical activist to scapegoat. And who remembers that in the 90s when Bill Clinton was running for president? She had spoken out on some things, and he took her words and turned it into saying that she was like the KKK, and he wanted to show the strong Republicans that he was against black. I'm starting to not really even like the term radical, but that's another conversation. But he wanted to not be associated with radicalness, but he also wanted to enjoy the benefits of being associated with, black middle class and educated Democrats to get that vote, which he was able to achieve. And he became successful in winning the presidency. And that was when conscious hip hop was starting to decline and starting to be slowly replaced by gangster rap and commercial rap, because as we just talked about, commercialism was starting to become the thing. We want to water down those messages of activism that are in music and film and culture, and we want to bring more palatable things in. Let's sell alcohol, let's sell sex, let's sell. So you got to notice who was starting to become more popular during the mid to late 90s. So then she wrote, after that, she wrote Coldest Winter Ever. And you start off with Winter Santiago saying she hates Sister Soldier. And I thought this quote was interesting in that same article, how Sister Soldier went from radical activist to scapegoat. In the novel, she appears as herself, a minor character who offers commentary on the greed and consumerism that permeate Winter's world and fuel her reckless actions. As a character, Soldier is a foil to Winter, a public figure. Because, if anyone's read that book, she makes a cameo. Winter is just like, she grew up, she's beautiful, her father was a gangster, he gave her everything, but then she gets humbled when he gets arrested and she has to fend for herself. And a lot of what the books are about, even like the subsequent stories, are really getting into values, the values that, Black culture may embrace, a lot of over materialism that could be a counter to lack. So going from lack to over materialism and a willingness to sell your soul just for those things. So Sister Soldier's character tries to counter Winter's desires to just have extremeness. And so it's meant to be thought provoking, but it's very entertaining, so that it's not feeling preachy and you're really entertained by this incredible story. But No Disrespect doesn't get the same amount of, it doesn't get the respect I think it deserves. It's a totally different book. It's like her memoir. It's like her, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, but she writes it in chapters about people. And that's such a cool way to organize a book. Because think about a lot, like if you think about your coming of age years, a lot of times you can organize it. A lot of times we write linear and you'll read a story and it's, you was born here, you grew up this way, you went to this school. But another way that you can organize it is the people that you came across in your life and these errors that are associated with people. So, like a boyfriend she had, and I was looking for my copy where I could give you all the actual chapters, but it's buried in all my books. But I do remember the Nikki story that stuck out for me. She was a girl that she met in college who had a really like sad background, but she overcame. Her story reminds me of, there's this song on one of Music's albums that I love called Womanopoly, and he's a great storyteller too, but he does it in his music. And he talks about this girl who grew up in a harsh neighborhood, urban environment, and then she ends up just rising above, but she still has to question the value she adopts. So in the book, the Sister Soldier gets into like her young Black girlhood into womanhood. And sexuality is a lot of it, teen girls being involved with a boyfriend and being pressured to have sex, overcoming poverty, dealing with like her parents' separation, education, going to college, consciousness, which was around us in the 90s. We couldn't escape it as much as we can now. I would say the last 25 years, the consciousness became that dollar bill. We were never as pressured to worship money over everything like we used now. Then we weren't. It was consciousness, it was education for the sake of like, um, you know, rising above the racism and the systemic oppression, and then bringing other people along. It was this whole thing called Lift as You Climb. Y'all remember that? And there were T-shirts with a hand reaching up and a hand reaching down. That was like embedded in us. Mentor people, pull, pull, pull. And now it's like, no, you're on your own. And friendship was a huge part of the book too. So I think it's still a relevant book. I didn't see a ton of stuff online. Like you have Bookstagram now, but Bookstagram came out in around 2013, I think, about a little over 10 years. And Book Talk, I don't know when that came out, but you tend to see a lot of the more current books on there and some of the same books everybody's reading. Whereas there's some good stuff that came out in previous years. So that's why I wanted to review this. I give it 5 stars. I think it was impactful and bold, honest, relatable, and thought provoking. And I really thank Sister Soldier for writing that. I had a clip that I was going to show. Do we have any comments?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Hey, Janelle. I examine the true value of the entertainment we're exposed to. I go back and look at artists' 5-year body of work. And if it's not about anything progressive, I stop supporting them. I hear that, Janelle. I think we need more of that. And then you ever go back? I go on these walks, and sometimes you go back and you listen, you're like, oh, that didn't age well. So there's some artists that had some music like around 2014, 2015. If you listen to it now, it's like cringy. Thank you, Janelle, for that comment. Then you got stuff that's like timeless. So yeah, can we put that clip on of the for Sister Soldiers, no disrespect?
Sure. Give me a
Okay.
sec because I had to pull up the actual comment. Give me one sec.
Okay. Yeah, keep the comments coming.
Vocal voice like this in my writing one day. Note to my readers. I never said I was an angel, nor am I innocent or holy like the Virgin Mary. What I am is natural and serious and as sensitive as an open nerve on an ice cube. I'm a young black sister with an unselfish heart who overdosed on love long ago. My closest friends consider me soft-spoken. Others say I have a deadly tongue. And while it's true that I have a spicy attitude like most of the ghetto girls I know, I back it up with a quick, precise, and knowledgeable mind. See, so many of us just be wanting to run our mouth and be smart, have attitude, don't know nothing. You gotta have a quick mind to back that smart mouth up, honey. My memory runs way back, and I'm inclined to remind people of the things they like most to forget. My brothers and sisters born into the confusion of North America who emerge into positions of leadership do so less because we're saints in the purported European sense, and more so because we have an intense ability to feel in the African sense. We feel not only for ourselves, but for the entire African family. This is true. I want to share a story, not for accolades, but to piggyback on that. I was thinking, like, if we live more village minded and more communally as a melanated people, we would get so much further along in life. Like, I had a homegirl the other day. She had an issue going on with her tire. I had the free time to go help and assist. I had to pick up her brother and help them find a tire location, all this and that. And we found one, and she's like, "Well, how are we gonna pay for the tire?" And I'm like, "All right, I got you." So, because I've had my tire blown out on me before in a whole nother city. I've had to like get whole lug nuts repaired. I've had, situations in my life where people have really come to my rescue and really invested in me. And so I was $30. So I, made sure she got the tire. She was good. She was squared away. And when I thought about it, I've been thinking on it the past few days. I'm like, one, I'm blessed that I had the ability to be able to do that. But two, like, I felt like it was my car. Like, I don't want to see my sister with her flat tire and her brother both are using a car and have kids that they need to transport. And I just felt like that's what village mindedness is. Like, I truly live and think that way. And I think that if we all did, we would be less selfish, we would be less consumed with our own worries and drama, and we'd be able to be accessible and available for others when we need help. It wouldn't be such a big deal. So that part just reminded me of that. We feel not only for ourselves, but for our African family. We feel our people's pains, their torture, their joy, and their happiness. We feel the spirit of our ancestors who challenge us to be more than what white society gives us as standards and limitations. So everything I believe is said to be extreme. Yet none of my critics can deny that conditions for African people in America and throughout the world are extreme. No matter how backward and negative the mainstream view and image of black people, I feel compelled to reshape that image and explore our many positive angles because I love my own people. Perhaps this is because I've been blessed with spiritual African eyes at a time when most Africans have had their eyes poked out. I see the beauty and talent in my people in all areas of life. Our potential is infinite. I humbly thank God for this vision because I've seen African people, young and old, overlook themselves for the span of a lifetime. I've seen beautiful, original, deep tar men whose appearance and spirit resonate with and represent the power of God feel small in the presence of frail, pale, spiritual midgets. I've seen big-eyed, hyperactive black children sit side by side in classrooms with white children who felt superior because they had a greater ability to sit still.
Okay, we're going to
Meanwhile,
stop
the
there.
African child had a
I didn't want to interrupt it. And, I'll tell you, I I don't have the, can you tell me, producer, what the name of that clip was from? Do
Yeah, give
you?
me one sec.
Okay. I'm, I show when I'm looking at these books that I review, I've come across really well made, sometimes interviews or individual reviews done that don't have a lot of views. And then I'm thinking to myself, wow, they took the time to put content together about a book, and there's hardly anyone that knows about it. So I'll show part of it with with the suggestion that if you like it, you can go to their page and look at their content. So I don't want to show, I don't want to be too long-winded with that. And that was a long clip, but I thought it was cool that she read some of the book. She read the forward, and then she went on a tangent and talked about how it applied to her life. And that's her wording, it doesn't reflect, um, that's her style of expression. And that's partly why I wanted to share it.
All right, that was from the Morgan Myers YouTube channel.
Okay.
Intro, note to readers, no disrespect, by Sister Soldier.
Yeah, Morgan Myers. Yeah, because she does the whole book. She reads it and she divides it in chapters on her book. So that is, let's see. I think I already said I gave that 5 stars, impactful and bold, honest and relatable. If you have a teen girl in your life and you can find that book, I think it's a good one to gift her. Any comments out there?
No, it doesn't have no comments so far. I think we're pretty much good.
Okay, that's all right. I know people are out shopping. Next week is the Thanksgiving holiday. I wish everyone a lot of health and safety. We have a little over a month for 2025 to be wrapped. I got a lot of great content coming your way, both I'll say, especially for the new year, because I'm really excited about continuing to build on this. And yeah, share it to people who like books, who like stories, and appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time.